Two sisters born under a blood moon, one destined to lead in the light, the other condemned to the shadows. But when a ruthless alpha marries the wicked twin, the moon goddess steps in. Betrayal, ancient magic, and a glowing mark will tear a kingdom apart. Whose side will you choose? The heavy iron doors of the great keep groaned against the bitter northern wind. Inside, the grand hall of the Ethelgard pack was a sensory storm of roasting venison, thick pine smoke, and the heavy musk of 300 wolves awaiting the equinox mating ceremony. It was the year of our Lord 1342, and survival in the Frost Peak valleys demanded cruelty just as often as it demanded courage. At the high table sat Alpha Garrett. He was a mountain of a man, clad in boiled leather and the gray furs of the beasts he had slain with his own broadsword. At 24, he was a battle-hardened tactician, revered for his brutal efficiency in the border wars, yet his pack was growing restless. An alpha without a Luna was an alpha with one hand tied behind his back. The spiritual link of the pack depended on the maternal, grounding force of a female leader, and tonight, the fates were expected to reveal her. Standing among the unmarried females were the twin daughters of Elder Tobias. To the untrained eye, Bryn and Freya were identical. Both possessed cascading hair the color of spun silver, striking ice-blue eyes, and the lean, predatory grace of high-born wolves. But beneath the skin, they were night and day. Freya was fire and venom. She was draped in crimson velvet, her lips painted with crushed berries, her chin tilted in absolute arrogance. For years, she had meticulously woven a web of deceit throughout the village, claiming credit for Bryn's foraging, Bryn's herbal remedies, and Bryn's silent sacrifices. Bryn, standing half a step behind her sister in a simple, undyed linen tunic, kept her eyes on the mud-stained cobblestones. She was the village punching bag, conditioned by her father and sister to believe she was a runt, a defective wolf whose only purpose was to serve. Freya had even gone so far as to secretly drug Bryn's food with diluted wolfsbane, keeping Bryn's inner wolf suppressed and weak, unable to shift or speak. As the ceremonial drums began a slow, rhythmic thumping, Alpha Garrett stood. The hall fell dead silent. He descended the stone steps, his nostrils flaring as he inhaled the scent of the room. The ritual of the moon dictates that an alpha will know his destined mate by her scent, a singular, intoxicating fragrance that calls to his soul. Garrett's piercing hazel eyes locked onto the twins. He marched straight toward them, the crowd parting like the Red Sea. Bryn's breath hitched. A sudden, overwhelming aroma of rain-soaked earth and burning embers flooded her senses. Her suppressed wolf, dormant for years, violently clawed at her ribcage, howling a single word in her mind: mate. The mate bond, ancient and undeniable, was snapping into place. Her heart hammered against her sternum as she dared to look up, her ice-blue eyes meeting Garrett's. Garrett stopped inches from her. He smelled it too, the breathtaking scent of wild honeysuckle and fresh snow. It was coming from the sisters, but before he could reach for Bryn, Freya stepped directly into his path, deliberately blocking her twin. Freya had prepared for this. She had bathed in an overpowering perfume of crushed lilac and pheromones extracted from a rutting stag, a desperate medieval concoction meant to hijack the senses. "My alpha," Freya purred, her voice dripping with honey. She placed a daring, delicate hand on Garrett's chest armor. Garrett frowned, his wolf confused. The divine scent was there, hovering around them, but Freya's aggressive posture and intoxicating, heavy perfume muddied his instincts. He looked at Freya fierce, confident, radiating the ruthless energy he believed a Luna needed to survive the harsh winters. Then, he looked at Bryn. Bryn was trembling, her linen dress frayed, her eyes wide with desperate hope. She looked frail, broken. "She is weak," Garrett's rational mind whispered, drowning out the frantic pacing of his inner wolf. "Ethelgard needs a warrior queen, not a trembling servant." Freya leaned in, her lips grazing Garrett's ear. "Do not be fooled by her, my alpha," she whispered loud enough for the front rows to hear. "My sister's mind is tainted by the dark spirits of the woods. She cannot even shift. She is a barren, broken thing. The scent you catch is mine." clouded only by her stench. Bryn gasped, her hands flying to her chest. "No, Garrett, please." "The bond," she choked out, her voice raw from disuse. Garrett's jaw tightened. In the brutal politics of the 14th century, an alpha could not afford a weak link. Tradition allowed an alpha to reject a mate if they were deemed unfit for the survival of the pack. Logic overpowered destiny. He grabbed Freya's waist and pulled her flush against him, raising his right hand to the crowd. "I have found my Luna," Garrett roared, his voice echoing off the vaulted ceilings. The crowd erupted into cheers and howls. Bryn stood paralyzed. Garrett turned his cold gaze back to Bryn. "And as for the defective twin," he declared, his voice cutting through the cheers like a steel blade, "I, Alpha Garrett of Ethelgard, reject any bond, true or false, to Bryn, daughter of Tobias. You are unfit to stand beside me. You are banished to the outer servant quarters." The rejection hit Bryn with physical force. It felt as though a serrated hunting knife had been plunged into her chest and twisted. She let out a blood-curdling scream that silenced the hall, dropping to her knees on the cold stone. Black blood seeped from her nose as the spiritual tether was violently severed. Freya looked down at her sister, a wicked, triumphant smirk playing on her lips. "Take the trash out," she commanded the guards, but Bryn did not wait for the guards. Clutching her chest, stumbling blindly through her tears, she scrambled to her feet and ran. She fled through the heavy oak doors, past the guards, and plunged into the freezing, snow-covered embrace of the Blackwood forest. The midnight cold was merciless, but the frostbite gnawing at Bryn's bare feet was nothing compared to the agony in her soul. A rejected mate rarely survived the night. The sheer shock of the severed bond usually caused the wolf's heart to give out. Bryn collapsed at the edge of the Whispering Pool, a sacred ancient body of water hidden deep within the territory. The ice cracked under her weight as she crawled to the water's edge, hacking up dark blood into the snow. Above her, the sky was utterly clear, save for the massive glowing orb of the moon. Tonight was the lunar eclipse. "Why?" Bryn sobbed to the sky, her tears freezing on her pale cheeks. "Why make him my mate if he was only going to destroy me? Why give me a wolf that cannot fight?" As the celestial bodies aligned, and a shadow began to creep across the face of the moon, turning it a deep, rusty crimson, the air around the pool changed. The howling wind abruptly died. The freezing temperature suddenly felt like a warm summer evening. The water in the pool began to glow with a blinding, ethereal silver light. Bryn dragged herself backward, shielding her eyes. From the center of the illuminated water, a figure formed, not of flesh, but of pure starlight and mist. It was a wolf the size of a warhorse, with eyes like nebulas and a coat that shimmered with the dust of 1,000 galaxies. "Selene," Bryn realized, her breath catching in her throat. "The moon goddess." The divine entity stepped out of the water, leaving no ripples. She approached Bryn, who lay trembling on the frozen earth. The goddess lowered her massive head, pressing her cold, starlit snout against Bryn's forehead. "Man's arrogance blinds him to true strength," a voice echoed, not in the air, but directly inside Bryn's mind. It was a symphony of a million whispers, ancient and infinitely compassionate. "He chose the crown of thorns and cast away the diamond. But I do not abandon my daughters, little wolf. You have endured the poison of your kin and the betrayal of your mate with a pure heart. Your chains are broken." The goddess opened her jaws and exhaled a breath of pure silver fire over Bryn. The pain in Bryn's chest vanished instantly, replaced by a surging volcanic power. The wolfsbane that had tainted her blood for years was instantly incinerated. Bryn screamed, not in pain, but in sheer ecstasy as her suppressed inner wolf awakened with the force of a tidal wave. "Rise, true Luna," the goddess commanded as she began to fade back into the mist. "Bear my mark. Let them see what they threw away." As the goddess vanished, and the eclipse reached its zenith, a searing heat bloomed on the left side of Bryn's neck, right over her collarbone. She scrambled to the edge of the pool, staring at her reflection in the glowing water. There, burned into her pale skin, was a shimmering silver insignia. a crescent moon pierced by a blooming, thorny rose. It wasn't just a tattoo. It pulsed with a faint, bioluminescent light. It was the mark of the celestial sovereign, a legend whispered by the elders. It had not been seen on a mortal wolf in 400 years. It signified a wolf, chosen directly by the heavens to rule. Suddenly, Bryn's bones began to crack and snap. The shift, denied to her for 20 years, tore through her body. She didn't shift into a standard timber wolf. She grew and grew. When the transformation was complete, a magnificent, snowy white direwolf stood by the pool. She was nearly twice the size of a normal wolf, her coat thick and glowing with health, her eyes striking, intelligent, ice blue. She threw her head back and let out a howl that shook the very roots of the ancient pines. A beautiful, terrifying sound that carried for miles. Back at the Great Keep, the mating ceremony had dissolved into a nightmare. Garrett and Freya stood at the altar to receive the elder's blessing, but as Elder Tobias raised the ceremonial chalice to anoint them, the great hearth fire in the center of the hall suddenly sputtered and died. The torches lining the stone walls hissed, their flames turning a sickly, unnatural green. The pack members gasped, clutching their chests. The spiritual link that was supposed to bind them to their new Luna felt entirely wrong. Instead of a warm, protective embrace, a cold, suffocating dread washed over the Ethelgard wolves. Several Omegas dropped to their knees, vomiting violently as the toxic energy of Freya's dark, manipulative soul was forced into the pack network. Garrett staggered, gripping the edge of the heavy oak table. His wolf was violently thrashing in his mind, clawing at the walls of his consciousness in absolute panic. When he looked at Freya, the illusion of her beauty cracked. He didn't see a fierce warrior queen. He felt a hollow, rotting emptiness. "What is happening?" Freya demanded, her voice shrill and panicked, grabbing Garrett's arm. Before Garrett could answer, a massive, earth-shattering howl echoed through the walls of the keep. It was a howl of pure dominance, of ancient, wild magic. Every wolf in the hall, from the lowest Omega to Alpha Garrett himself, felt an involuntary urge to drop to their knees and bare their throats in submission. It was the howl of a true royal. In the muddy courtyard outside, young Gideon, a stable boy, had been fetching firewood when he saw her. Emerging from the tree line as dawn began to break was a monstrous white wolf, moving with the grace of a phantom. She paused, locking eyes with the boy. Gideon fell to his knees in the slush, trembling with awe as he saw the unmistakable silver glow of the goddess's mark radiating through the white fur on her shoulder. The wolf didn't attack. She simply turned and vanished into the mountain mist. Within hours, the rumors ignited like wildfire in dry grass. A royal white wolf had been seen. A true chosen Luna was roaming the Frost Peak valleys. Freya paced her luxurious new chambers, tearing at her hair. She had overheard the guards whispering. She knew exactly who that white wolf was. Driven by madness and a desperate need to secure her stolen throne, she took a silver dagger from Garrett's desk, gritted her teeth, and violently carved a crescent moon into her own collarbone. But magic cannot be forged. The wound didn't glow. It simply bled, festering and turning black against her skin, a grotesque, rotting scar that mirrored the ugliness of her soul. The false Luna was decaying from the inside out, and the Ethelgard pack was beginning to starve for the light they had so blindly cast away. The winter of 1342 dragged on, burying the Ethelgard territory beneath relentless, suffocating snowdrifts. But the cold outside was nothing compared to the freezing rot taking hold within the Great Keep. Alpha Garrett's pack was dying. The false mating bond with Freya acted as a spiritual parasite, draining the vitality from the wolves. A mysterious ailment, reminiscent of the dreaded sweating sickness that plagued the human settlements of Lord Henry of York to the south, began tearing through the lower ranks. Pups were born weak, and the strongest warriors found themselves gasping for breath after simple patrols. At the center of this decay sat Freya. Her desperation to maintain the illusion of her divine right had driven her entirely mad. The crescent moon she had so brutally carved into her collarbone refused to heal. It wept black fluid, carrying a stench of death that no amount of imported lavender or heavy frankincense could mask. She hid it behind high-collared velvet dresses and thick scarves, lashing out violently at any servant who dared to look at her for too long. Garrett, once a towering symbol of military might and tactical brilliance, was reduced to a paranoid, exhausted shadow of himself. The inner wolf he relied on for instinct and strength had completely retreated into the darkest corners of his mind, refusing to engage with the toxic presence of Freya. Every time he attempted to draw comfort from his supposed Luna, he was met with a wall of nauseating, hollow vanity. He spent his nights in the war room, staring blankly at parchment maps, haunted by the memory of wild honeysuckle and fresh snow. He realized with a creeping, agonizing horror what he had truly thrown away. While Ethelgard withered under a false crown, Brynn was thriving in a world she never knew existed. Following the eclipse, Brynn had traveled far beyond the borders of her cruel father's influence, crossing the treacherous jagged peaks into the territory of House Lancaster. This was the domain of Alpha Dominic, a ruler whose legendary fairness was only matched by his terrifying prowess in battle. Unlike the brutal, fear-mongering tactics of the southern packs, Dominic led with a profound respect for the old ways, emphasizing pack harmony and mutual survival. Dominic's patrol had found Brynn in her magnificent white direwolf form, collapsed in a meadow from sheer exhaustion. They did not attack. Recognizing the sheer ancient power radiating from her sleeping form, they escorted her to their stronghold. When she shifted back to her human form, draped in the furs they offered, Dominic saw the glowing, bioluminescent mark on her collarbone. The Alpha immediately fell to one knee, bowing his head in absolute reverence. "The Celestial Sovereign's blessing," Dominic murmured, his deep, commanding voice vibrating through the stone courtyard. "We are honored by your presence, true Luna. My home is yours. My warriors are your shield." For the first time in her agonizing life, Brynn was not treated as a defective runt or a convenient servant. She was revered. But Dominic went further than simple worship. He offered her genuine friendship and a safe haven to heal her shattered soul. He taught her how to harness the surging, volcanic magic within her veins. Under his patient guidance, Brynn learned that her powers extended far beyond a magnificent physical shift. She possessed the ancient gift of the Earth Singer. With a single touch, she could mend broken bones, draw poison from deep wounds, and coax blooming life from the frozen, barren winter soil. Within weeks, House Lancaster prospered unimaginably. Crops pushed through the snow, and the sick were entirely cured. The wolves of Lancaster grew larger, their coats shining with unprecedented health, buoyed by the radiant maternal energy their guest provided. Dominic and Brynn formed an incredibly deep platonic bond, a partnership forged in mutual respect and shared wisdom. She found herself smiling, her laughter echoing through the halls, a sound like silver bells that warmed the hearts of every wolf who heard it. However, secrets as massive as a royal white wolf cannot be contained forever. Spies from the starving Ethelgard pack, desperate for any hope, brought whispers back to Alpha Garrett. They spoke of an ethereal woman with spun silver hair, bearing the glowing mark of the moon goddess, dwelling in the Lancaster stronghold and bringing miraculous prosperity to their lands. The description hit Garrett like a physical blow to the stomach. The truth finally snapped into absolute, undeniable focus. The overwhelming scent, the sudden awakening of his dormant wolf at the ceremony, the horrifying feeling of severing the bond, it all made sense. Freya had not been his mate. She had manipulated him, and he, blinded by superficial strength and political logic, had foolishly rejected the greatest gift the heavens could bestow upon an alpha. Enraged and desperate, Garrett stormed into Freya's chambers. He found her shrieking at a trembling servant, her face pale and gaunt, applying thick white powder to conceal her decaying skin. "Get out!" Garrett roared at the servant, who instantly fled. He crossed the room in 2 massive strides, grabbing the heavy velvet collar of Freya's dress and ripping it downward. The foul stench of rotting flesh immediately filled the opulent room. The carved, festering wound on her collarbone was exposed a grotesque, pathetic mockery of the divine mark. "You lied to me," Garrett snarled, his voice trembling with a terrifying, homicidal fury. his hands clamped around her throat, squeezing slightly. You poisoned my mind. You poisoned this entire pack. You stole my true mate from me. I did it for us, Freya gasped, clawing pathetically at his iron grip. She was weak. She would have ruined you. I am your Luna. The pack needs me. The pack is dying because of you, he spat, hurling her across the stone floor. She crumpled against the wall, weeping hysterically. You are no Luna. You are a parasite, and I will leave you here to rot with the lie you created. Without another word, Garrett turned his back on the false queen. He mobilized his most loyal elite guard. Driven by a maddening cocktail of profound regret, possessive instinct, and desperate survival, Alpha Garrett marched north toward the Lancaster borders. He was determined to grovel, to beg, and if necessary to bleed, in order to reclaim the mate he had so brutally cast away. He would force the bond back into existence, no matter the cost. The Lancaster courtyard was bathed in the crisp, golden light of the winter sun when Garrett's war party arrived at the heavy iron gates. They were an intimidating sight, but they were vastly outnumbered by Dominic's warriors, who stood atop the battlements with their bows drawn and their wolves pacing restlessly. The air was incredibly tense, thick with the metallic scent of impending violence. Alpha Dominic stood calmly at the center of the courtyard, flanked by his highest-ranking generals. He wore a simple leather tunic, projecting an aura of quiet, unshakable authority that made Garrett's aggressive posturing look like the tantrums of a frightened child. Alpha Garrett of Ethelgard, Dominic called out, his voice smooth but laced with lethal warning. You march on my borders heavily armed. State your business, or my archers will decorate the snow with your blood. Garrett stepped forward, his fists clenched tightly at his sides. He looked ragged, his eyes shadowed with exhaustion and desperate regret. I have not come for war, Dominic. I have come to right a terrible wrong. I have come for my mate. I have come for Bryn. A heavy, absolute silence fell over the courtyard. Then, the massive wooden doors of the main keep slowly creaked open. The collective breath of Garrett's guard hitched. Bryn emerged. She was no longer the frail, trembling servant girl dressed in frayed, undyed linen. She wore an elegant, flowing gown of midnight blue that perfectly contrasted her cascading silver hair. But it wasn't the clothes that made the men freeze. It was the sheer, breathtaking power radiating from her very pores. The silver, bioluminescent mark on her collarbone pulsed visibly in the daylight. She walked with the undeniable, fluid grace of royalty, her chin held high, her icy blue eyes burning with ancient, divine knowledge. Garrett's heart hammered against his ribs. His inner wolf, silent for months, suddenly let out a deafening, agonizing howl of longing and profound sorrow. He dropped to his knees in the cold mud, completely ignoring the stunned gasps of his own warriors. Bryn, Garrett choked out, his voice cracking with heavy emotion. My beautiful Bryn, I was blind. I was manipulated by your sister's dark poison. Please, I beg for your forgiveness. The pack is starving. I am dying without you. Come back to Ethelgard. Reclaim your rightful place at my side. Bryn stopped 10 paces from him. She looked down at the Alpha who had shattered her soul, feeling absolutely nothing. The frantic, desperate pull of the mate bond that once dominated her senses was completely gone, incinerated by the goddess's silver fire. You speak of rightful places, Garrett, Bryn began, her voice echoing with a strange, dual resonance, as if the goddess Selene were speaking alongside her. But you do not understand what right means. You chose a crown built on cruelty and deception because it mirrored your own fears. You rejected me not because Freya manipulated you, but because you looked at my gentle heart and deemed it a weakness. Garrett flinched, as if he had been struck with a whip. I was wrong. I will spend the rest of my life making it up to you. I am your Alpha, and you are my mate. You are no longer my Alpha, Bryn stated coldly, her voice ringing out across the frozen valley. And you were never worthy of being my mate. Bryn raised her right hand. The glowing insignia on her neck flared with blinding brilliance. Suddenly, the sky above them rapidly darkened, the sun eclipsed by heavy, swirling storm clouds. A beam of pure ethereal starlight broke through the darkness, illuminating Bryn in a breathtaking, divine spotlight. By the ancient laws of the celestial sovereign, which predate your borders and your arrogant titles, I exercise the royal prerogative, Bryn declared, her voice carrying the undeniable weight of absolute law. Garrett of Ethelgard, for the crime of forsaking the sacred bond, for allowing your people to wither under a false idol, I formally strip you of your alpha command. Garrett opened his mouth to protest, but a sudden, terrifying agony ripped through his chest. The invisible, spiritual mantle of leadership, the heavy, magical weight he had carried since his father's death, was violently torn from his soul. He collapsed into the mud, gasping for air as he was reduced to a mere omega. His guards watched in absolute horror, instantly dropping their weapons and lowering their heads in complete submission to the true Luna. Ethelgard will not perish, Bryn continued, the divine light slowly fading as she lowered her hand. The pack will be absorbed into House Lancaster. Alpha Dominic will rule the United Territories with the fairness and honor you severely lacked. Your people will be fed. Your sick will be healed. But you, Garrett, will live the rest of your days as an exile, wandering the very shadows you once condemned me to. Garrett wept into the snow, shattered and entirely broken, understanding finally that true power does not roar and demand. It heals and protects. He crawled away, a pathetic, nameless rogue, destined to be forgotten by history. Back in the decaying walls of the great keep, Justice found the false queen. Driven utterly mad by the agonizing pain of her rotting scar and the absolute abandonment of her alpha, Freya wandered blindly into the freezing blizzard during the night, chasing phantom whispers of a crown she never deserved. She was never seen again, her dark legacy buried forever beneath the purifying winter snow. Bryn stood on the balconies of House Lancaster alongside Dominic, looking out over the newly united peaceful territories. She had not just survived the darkness, she had commanded it to bow. She was no longer just a rejected twin. She was the celestial Luna, the Earth Singer, a beacon of hope for a new, prosperous era. Thank you for joining us on this epic medieval journey of betrayal, magic, and true redemption. If you were captivated by Bryn's incredible transformation from a rejected and broken servant into a powerful, celestial-marked Luna, hit that like button right now. Don't forget to share this thrilling werewolf drama with your friends, and subscribe to our channel for more breathtaking tales of romance and revenge. Hit the notification bell so you never miss an epic adventure. See you next time.